All right, so the message, actually this is my principal message, and that is that RSI is not just a program at CEE, it's an opportunity. It's one of the principal programs that CEE sponsors, but the opportunity that I think we're presenting you and your children is for continuing support, continuing engagement. And when I mean continuing, I don't mean just for the summer that's facing them now, and I don't even mean for the rest of their high school careers. CEE has supported their alums through their high school, college, graduate school, and careers, and I think that that's perhaps one of the most misunderstood messages about CEE is that kind of support that exists for years and years that your students will be able to take advantage of. On the slide here, you'll see just a few things a few of the activities that are underway that alumni can participate in. You'll see that there was, and there is every year, a congressional luncheon, which is quite an event, a very impressive event. This past year with I think 6 or 7 members of Congress, senators and congressmen, that attended the luncheon and spoke. We have a number of events that CEE sponsors. You'll note there, for instance, that, and I attended this, Ambassador Pickering's briefing that he gave to alums and others. We have the sponsors and the friends of CEE, companies like Akamai and others are continuing to support the students through webinars and meetings and other fora where they can learn about industry, learn about opportunities, learn about careers. I'll let you read the rest of those, but really suffice it to say that there are a number of things that your children will be able to participate in as they go along through their careers. Now, as parents, at the bottom there, you'll see that we want the parents to be involved as well, not just the students. So we and in fact, those parents on the call today, the volunteers that are going to be answering your questions, and I are part of what we call the Resource Advisory Committee, and those are parents that help support all of CEE's programs, but RSI in particular. All right, next slide. Thanks. Now, you all know what wonderful students and scholars your children are, but you may not know generally how well they stack up against other students. And we see that these RSI scholars, of which your children are going to be alums for this coming year, the year of 2017, you'll see that they have consistently performed in just outstanding ways in a number of other fora. So if you look here, everything from Intel Science, they've become MacArthur Fellows, Siemens competitions. There are many ways that these students excel and set themselves apart. So we're certainly proud of them. I know you are, but you should know that as a group, they have done amazing things. The next few slides I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, except just to give you a quick thumbnail of how this group, how RSI alums are representing the country and really the world. We see that there's a number of countries, 16 of them beyond the United States, that are represented in RSI 2017. And then if you look at, even on a broader scale, remember I said that this continuing support is not short term. We have RSI alum that have been involved in the program since its inception in 1984. And when I say involved, they are right now currently involved, currently active, currently working with one another, following each other, helping each other in their careers. So 1984 is not just the first group, it's the group that started this vast collaboration. But you'll see that since 1984, we've represented over 54 countries. Looking at this coming year, 2017, the profile is there. I'm not going to read it to you, but we represent a number of states that is not all that different than our historical representation. In terms of gender, we have almost a balance in 2017, 42% women, 58% male. We have, in terms of high schools, you'll see that we don't just represent public schools, but we represent private and parochial as well, and home schools. And not surprising to any of you, because again, the high performing students that you have, but you'll see the PSAT scores represent really some amazing achievements. So I know that they're focused on this summer, and this opportunity is a terrific one, and they're coming up then on the end of their high school careers, so they're going to be thinking, if they're not already, about where they're going to be going to college. And you'll see that RSI attracts these students to these amazing universities. And really, I should say it the other way around. These universities are attracted to your students, and not just because of RSI, but RSI is certainly a bellwether of their performance. And you'll see that Harvard is still one of the larger draws right now. Harvard has over a third of all RSI students. MIT, others are big players as well, and you'll see some that are growing. Stanford is one in particular, and some others that are growing as the years pass. So there's no doubt that these universities see your students, see the RSI alums as potential, again, performers in their context, in college, as just wonderful assets to their universities. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Lucas, and you can talk about where else people can find information before we turn it to the Q&A with the parents.
Okay, so it's pretty straightforward for places that you can find CEE. We have our own website, www.cee.org. We also have our own YouTube channel, our own Twitter page, and also our own Facebook page. So there's a lot of different places where you can find us and more information about RSI if you are so interested. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to your questions. So I've got a few that some of the parents have gotten and sent in, so we'll just go right into that after we introduce Susan and Marley. So Susan and Marley, if you want to just introduce yourselves, say a little bit about why you're here today and who you are.
Sure. I'm Marley Pasternak. My son Charlie was in the RSI class of 2012. I've been involved in the parents group and am just very pleased to be a part of this today. I did a similar one a year ago, and we found it pretty useful. My son Charlie is now a junior at Yale. Finished his junior year at Yale. Studying computer science, and still, rates RSI as one of the great experiences of his life.
Amazing. And Susan?
Okay, I'm Susan Wildstrom. I happen to be a high school math teacher and have had former students of my own who also attended RSI besides my son, Jake. My son Jake attended in 1997, so 20 years ago. It was a formative experience in his life. Jake is now a tenured associate professor at the University of Louisville. He teaches math. I've worked on, what have I worked on? The Parents Committee a little bit. I'm involved in reading RSI applications, and RSI is like the best thing that happens to these young people.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you too for being on the call once again. I'll just start with some of the questions. We already had one person ask a question in the chat, and I guess we'll just sort of go down this line of questioning about RSI alumni and their sort of fast track into college. So one parent asks if, other than having, is there any specific reason that MIT or Harvard have a high admission rate for RSI alumni besides just these students, or sort of like what kind of qualities do RSI kids learn and go on to be accepted to these high tier schools?
So I'll say, I think the reason why a lot of kids go to MIT and Harvard is because they tend to be really excellent schools in the disciplines these kids are interested in. And my son, having chosen a different way, he actually got into both of those schools, but chose to go to Yale simply because he loved the school. But it's a hard choice for these kids. They're fortunate to have lots of great choices. I think in the end, students decide where they're going to college based on a lot of factors, including what they're interested in studying. Often the financial aid package is a huge component too.
Amazing, amazing. We also had another question sort of regarding college applications. And either Susan or Marley, if you want to speak to this experience, how did RSI alumni use their RSI experience in their college applications? Did they talk about it in their essays as like an honor and accomplishment? What sort of things did your children use?
I'm sure Jake used it in his essays because it was so different from anything that your typical student would do. My son actually attended MIT. He got in early and then applied to a number of other schools that he got into, including Princeton and Stanford, but wanted to go to MIT. My son got no financial aid, but yes, talking about the research experience that you have at RSI is an important component of your application.
Yes, Charlie wrote one of his essays about RSI as well. I'd go out on a limb, not having discussed this with other people, but say that I think it's pretty likely that most of these kids talk about their RSI experience in their applications. Charlie also used his RSI experience further, and I think a lot of kids do take their projects and take them to various different competitions and presentations, so that the work they do over the summer often carries through. Some of them continue to do research in the same field. Some of them just use that research, but use it for other things as well. And then, of course, those other competitions and things like that become a part of their college applications as well.
Cool. Thank you. You talked about the research that your children had done, and I guess we'll sort of go into that. There were a couple questions regarding if RSI students get the chance to come up with their own research projects, or will they be assigned one by their mentors? Did you two want to go into that in a little further detail, like what these research projects entail?
So Charlie was assigned to him. I think the way it's done is, if I remember right, you list in your application some areas of interest and some things you'd be interested in working on, and then you're paired with a mentor. RSI works very, very hard to get really top-notch mentors for these kids who can give them projects to work on that would be in their areas of interest. The specific project Charlie did was assigned to him, but if I remember right, it was right down the lines of one of the things he had mentioned he was interested in.
The experience is a little bit different. The specifying approximately what you want to do was part of it, and yes, he was assigned a mentor. Jake actually came in with a very specific research question in mind, and he was able to do that research question as his project.
This is Maite. What I will say, thank you, ladies. You have explained it very, very well. The matching process is done by the RSI director this summer. That is Dr. Amy Silman from the class, of 1984 who is a biologist in training. What happens is, and Susan has read files, so she knows there's a lot of question around what you're interested in, what your goals are, what you've done, what you hope to achieve. And it's really based on your credentials, your background, the similar interest of the person who would work with you, the mentor. In Jake's case, he was fortunate that he knew exactly what he wanted to do. Some students don't know that, and they're not required to come in to work with any mentor on a specific questions. Most of the time, the mentor and the student come up with a question that they'd like to work on together, rather than, the mentor just saying, you're going to work on this problem. They always check to make sure, because you want a happy lab and you want a happy person in the lab, because they're going to work that much harder. And one of the questions that parents are going to have, when are we going to know what they're working on? In some cases, you will know before. In other cases, they're going to learn when they get to MIT. Why is that? It's at the discretion of the mentor. Some mentors prefer meeting the student face to face before they start assigning a project or deciding what they're going to do in a lab. Other mentors want to engage in advance. So we leave it at the discretion of the mentor. And at no time does any RSI director really place a student. If you're heavily biology focused and have great credentials in that area and not that much math, we wouldn't put you in a project, say in, computational biology. It really is based on what you know, what background you have, your interest, and how it lines up with the potential mentor.
Awesome. Thank you, Maite. So since you're talking about the research projects and everything, a couple of parents had questions regarding what sort of impact RSI will have on children socially and academically. So Susan and Marley, if you want to sort of talk about what qualities your children came away with, both socially and academically, that would be amazing.
Susan, you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I can go first. My son Jake was one of these children who, until he ended up in magnet program, didn't understand that his intellectual capacity was different from others. So he always assumed that others didn't like him for no particular reason. When he finally started to meet with students who were at his intellectual level, he started to be much more social and much more socially adept. Being said, he got to RSI, the awesomeness of being with people who were every bit as smart as he was, and then some, was really important to him, and it really gave him a chance to sort of come out and blossom socially. I also know Charlie. I met Charlie when he was, who knows, 6th grade, 7th grade.
Yeah.
And Charlie is another young person who blossomed socially when he was suddenly put in contact with others who were his peers. Marley, go.
So what Susan said is exactly right. Charlie really, one of the best parts of the experience for Charlie, he loved the academic part of it. He loved doing the research. In terms of academics, what he learned from that, the entire process was incredible. You do this amazing project, but they teach you many things outside of that. For example, how to then present your findings. Writing that report was an incredibly difficult, time-consuming, and advanced process for kids of this age. They are writing things that are on the level of college seniors and higher. It's really amazing what they end up doing. But that was sort of more anticipated. What we didn't necessarily anticipate was how Charlie felt like he was finally with people who got him, that he could be just who he was, and that was fine. He would spend hours, in the common areas with people, learning about the projects they were doing. He said one of the best parts about it was talking to, he was in math also, but one of the best parts for him was talking to kids who were in biology and chemistry and learning about the things they were doing that was fascinating. And they just all shared this experience together. And it's a very powerful experience, both socially and academically.
Yes, and thank you, ladies. So delighted to hear after all these years that you continue to have the sentiment about RSI and what your boys experienced. And I can say this to the audience, both Jake and Charlie are very involved, very engaged, helpful. If you want to go to anybody, they come, they volunteer, they'll do anything to help the crowd. And that's what we've been trying to do since the beginning of the program. Set it apart by offering opportunities to continue to engage throughout your life. You will see the projects will be great in terms of the academic, but it's the social piece, because often some students don't have the opportunity to attend a magnet school. So they may, in fact, be trapped with being like the smartest person in the whole school and maybe having one or two friends. Imagine going somewhere where there are 80 plus people just as smart, just as interested, and they want to tell math jokes, and that's fine. They enjoy it, and that's part of the magical experience, is the making of so many friends. And the alumni themselves come back and they have a role that they've created called nobodies. They're not official teaching assistants or counselors or other members of the staff, but they're there as a resource. They sometimes come in to help somebody, subject matter expert. Somebody needs to really work on a physics project. Somebody will come in, work with that particular student. And this happens towards the end of the program, throughout, but more intensely towards the end when they're preparing their papers and their talks. And you will see people come out of their shells by the end of the program. People that, could barely look above their shoes now look at the audience and are fully engaged. And some of these talks, I would say, are better than some of the professors we hear on campus. So it's a big involved process, but it takes into account everybody's level of presentation skill, writing skill, everything.
And if I could add one other thing, that I observed, this is Doug, in terms of these students and their comfort level, socialization, and so forth. At the end of their experience, they have these presentations that Maite's talking about. And they present their work. At one of them, I think it was 2 years ago, might have been 3 years ago, we had a panel of Nobel laureates that was speaking, and which in itself was a wonderful thing and a wonderful opportunity for these students to hear them. But the thing that I thought was notable, the thing I took away from that, was that I watched these students after the talk go up to this group of, we're talking about Nobel laureates, so these are certainly accomplished scientists and mathematicians, and interact with them with a great deal of comfort. We're talking about, again, your children and the ages that they are, to be able to stroll up and have really open, free discussions with a Nobel laureate about their work, about the work that they had been doing this summer, and about the work that the Nobel laureate might have done earlier. It was just remarkable to see how comfortable they were talking to these esteemed scientists. So that in itself was, for me, an eye-opener. I don't think that I ever would have been that comfortable at that age talking to that sort of folk.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a lot of really amazing experiences. And I do see a question in the chat here. If any one of you wants to go into sort of what a typical day will look like for an RSI student throughout the program. I'm not sure if...
I can take this one.
Yeah.
So the first week of the program, most of the students arrive on either Saturday or Sunday. Internationals arrive on Saturday, and the domestic students arrive on Sunday. They're greeted by very enthusiastic staff and counselors. And what we do in terms of the airport, in case this question is going to come up, if your student is arriving at Logan Airport, we try to get alumni or some of our counselors to greet them. At baggage claim, typically there'll be a small RSI sign, and we try to put them together in cabs to head over to Massey Hall, where they will live on MIT's campus for the 6 weeks. Try to do that so there's a friendly face greeting you, helping you, so you don't end up by yourself. But some people arrive at times where that might not be possible, but keep in mind, we will make sure that they get where they're supposed to be, and our staff is available throughout this process. You go into week one, they selected from a variety of courses that we offer. Everyone is expected to read. If they haven't read, by now most have, The Great Gatsby. They will attend a humanities class as a group, and then they have their choosing between engineering, physics, math, biology, and chemistry. So they attend two. Then there are skills sessions. MIT has its own computing system called Athena. They need to learn how to use it. So there'll be classes on how to use it. Some students will use to write their papers, people who use highly technical material and have equations, a thing called LaTeX. Some people pronounce it LaTeX, others LaTeX, whatever. They will all be taught to use that. The bio people often will use Word and will work with the mentors to make sure that all the papers are formatted correctly in the standard, no longer than 20 pages, with all of your components and, of course, your references. And they will be taught how to do this throughout the first 4 days. Then on the fourth night, which is a Thursday night, that's Meet Your Mentor night. That's when we ask the scientists or somebody from their lab to come and meet with a student and say hello. And we go through the expectations throughout the summer. Then you fast forward into the next 5 weeks. It's like us. They go to work every single day, either at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever the discretion of the lab is. And 3 to 4 nights a week, we have what's called a distinguished guest lecture series. And that will include Nobel Prize winners. In this year, we'll have physics and economics. It ranges. Sometimes we have a biologist. Other times we have a chemist. So it's based on availability. We will also have leaders in the different disciplines, in math, in computer science, and what have you. They will come and they will give a talk. And what's very interesting about this, and I think it answers the question of why they're so comfortable with these amazing people they meet, they have an opportunity to have a small group dinner with speakers. And we encourage them to do that, especially if the person is in the discipline that they're most interested in, and even the discipline that they have questions about. So that happens Monday through Thursday night, occasionally on a Friday night. And what else do they do? They're very busy, so you won't hear from them frequently, which is really good because they're making friends. These talks take place until 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And then after that, they meet with tutors. If there's not a talk, there are usually activities. They go to Harvard Square, they go to movies, they go eat ice cream, they go to different campuses because MIT is so centrally located. Sometimes they want to go and hang out at Harvard Square. But everything they do, with the exception of walking to class, they must be accompanied by another person. There will be checkout procedures. No one's allowed to leave campus alone. We ask parents, if you have relatives or yourselves visiting, please make prior arrangements. The MIT dorm, Massey Hall, is pretty much on lockdown, which means you need to make prior arrangements or they're not letting you in. We appreciate that level of security because it's very, very important. We don't want students wandering around any place at night by themselves. They need to go with a staff member. And believe me, they form groups, and there may be people who want to go eat Chinese food one night, while another group wants to go eat pizza. I mean, it's an amazing place. Boston is very student friendly. You don't really need a car. You can walk or take their famous T. So throughout the program, they're busy all day long into the evening. The last week of the program is when they're really writing up their research, doing presentations, mock presentations, and throughout the summer they have milestones about their research, their paper, and they have tutors who support them. And a lot of those are alumni who are in graduate school and subject matter experts, as well as leading professors who spend the summer with us. And the counselors, there'll be 6 groups, and those are RSI alumni from 1 or 2 years prior. So as you can see, there's a pattern. The teaching assistants are also RSI alumni. We tend to want them back. They're the ones that really understand and can support this program best.
Amazing. Thank you, Maite. That's a lot of information, I'm sure, for people to take in, but all very well and good. You talked about people having some downtime, and I'll give Maite a break. If Marley or Susan want to talk about, like, how much free time do you think your children had at RSI? What do the weekends look like for them? If either of you want to talk about that. Do we have
sort of equation for Charlie anyway? Because math research is unlike a chemistry lab or a biology lab where you're sitting in a lab actually performing an experiment. A lot of the math research, there's a lot of thinking time involved.
Yes.
So he wasn't sitting in a lab during the day like many of the kids are, which means he spent a fair amount of time in the computer labs that they have and in the common rooms and places like that, thinking about what he was doing, talking to some of the other math kids. Actually, sort of as an aside, Charlie was sort of worried that math research would be very lonely because you're not in a lab like that. But he was really pleased to find how collaborative it was, both with his mentor and with the other math kids at RSI. But free time is sort of an interesting thing because while there is time that's not necessarily accounted for, there's a lot of time during the day where you have things to do. If you're not actively working on your project, you're often thinking about your project or talking to other people about your project or about their project. So there's that kind of interaction. There is free time. There were activities, if I remember right, every weekend. There was, I would say, not a whole lot of time for getting into mischief.
No.
If that's what people are worried about. Kids are busy or in sight much of the time. And the other piece of it is, I'm sure there's always a couple of issues and some pranks and things like that. But by and large, these are pretty serious kids. Serious not as in not fun, but serious as in they recognize what they've got here and are really interested in making the most of that time. So while there were a lot of social events and things like that, 4th of July, of course, stands out when they go watch the fireworks and alums come back for that. Charlie still comes back every year that he can. it's a structured environment, I would say.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for your answer. You talk a little bit about the final projects, and I see there's another question here regarding the final presentations towards the end of camp. Is that something that parents get to be a part of, or in any way, or can you speak to that?
Maite here, not really, because everybody is from so many different places. If a parent finds themselves there locally, we wouldn't ask you to make a special trip to attend. Sure, you're welcome to come. Please check with your child. They may or may not be nervous that you're there. So that's the best response I could give you. We've had parents come in the past, and that's perfectly acceptable as long as we know, and more importantly, your child knows.
Awesome. And Susan and Marley, since we're on the topic of final presentations, if you remember your child's final presentation or like their project area of research at all, did you want to maybe talk about those briefly?
The area of research?
Yeah, or it's sort of what they researched and what they presented at the end of camp, and what that sort of led to after camp or after RSI.
I was going to say I would not call it camp.
Right,
Me either.
sorry.
I would freak that.
So Charlie's project, okay, I can't, it's hard for me to talk about Charlie's project because I never understood it. I had a slightly better understanding at the time because I heard more about it a lot then. It had something to do with quantum error computing, I think. And he wrote a really long paper about it, which I didn't understand at all, which I tried to read once and, said, go, Charlie, was about what I could do with that. But I know that the process of both writing it and presenting were really pivotal for Charlie because I love my son deeply, as anyone who knows me knows. Charlie can't organize a day out of a paper bag. It's just not in his wheelhouse, organization. So to do a project of this type and then have to write a paper, which I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 pages long,
yes,
is quite a challenge for a kid for I think any kid, but a kid like Charlie who's very disorganized. And I don't know what combination of adults and counselors and whatever all helped him, but I know he did. I mean, the kids do the projects on their own. They get guidance, they get advice, but they do the projects on their own. And for him to get that done, he was very proud of what he did, and justifiably so. He's not a particularly socially comfortable kid, but so doing that presentation would have been something I would have thought would be really tough for him. But they bring you to the point you need to be at, so that when he then needed to do his presentation, he did, and he wasn't, nauseous beforehand or anything. I mean, he went and he did his presentation, and people asked him questions, and it was a great experience.
We do this with Milestones. Because Charlie's not the only one that can have some challenges organizing. So throughout the summer, they have Milestones, and they work with their tutors and their mentors. And that's why we have teaching assistants both the first and last week to support the students, as well as a bunch of nobody RSI alumni volunteers.
So Jake's experience is that he came in with an idea what he wanted to do. He had actually talked to someone at Princeton about sort of a basic premise, and person had sort of pushed him in that direction. He had a great time putting together a good paper. The kids all do the presentations, and at the end of the session, I believe the top 5 papers and the top 5 presentations were recognized, and Jake's wasn't among any of those.
Neither was Charlie.
However, when he got back, he was very excited about it. I sort of understood a little bit, enough of it. My husband also was very interested in it. And Jake applied to present his paper at something called the Joint Math Meetings, which is a meeting of about 6,000 professional mathematicians, typically not high school mathematicians, but university level ones. And they have a whole series of student presentations. And Jake applied and was accepted, even though he was still only a high school student, to give this paper. And he apparently did a really good job, because one of the judges, who has since become a mentor and friend, awarded his paper with one of the handful of prizes. And this was in like January. He then went on to submit it to what was then Westinghouse. He submitted it to our local science fair. I think he also submitted it to the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium, and in all of those cases was recognized and able to go on to the next level. So he must have felt very comfortable talking about the project with people who asked questions. The paper must have been fairly well written, and he had a very positive experience with that whole thing. He was more organized than Charlie. Somehow Jake turned a corner between 9th and 10th grade. He turned a corner to where sloppy work no longer felt like the right thing to him. So he matured at the end at that point.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. Since you're talking about your kids, I think this is sort of the looming question on every parent's mind. How did you two support your child at RSI? What sort of role did you play while your child was at camp?
So I would be very happy to tell you that the way I supported my son was stay out of his way. He did, he would call now and then, but we tried. Kids are very busy. I think somebody's got music on.
Yes. We could mute that, whoever that's coming from.
There we go.
Okay.
The kids are very busy, so we didn't have, Charlie had his cell phone with him and would call us now and then when he had time. I feel pretty confident in saying we talked to him at least once a week, but we tried really not to bother him too much and let him call us when he had time. Part of the deal, I think, from our perspective, was this is a big opportunity for kids to be independent. This wasn't my project, and it wasn't my summer. And I wanted Charlie to be able to be there and to be fully present there and not to worry about us. So it was, although it was hard because we all want to know what our kids are up to, to us it sort of felt right to let him guide things.
Thank you.
So we stayed out of Jake's way as well. Because it was 20 years ago, it wasn't cell phone world. So Jake would send us emails, and I probably still have them still around somewhere. Jake's experience, though, was that this was his 4th summer being away at what we always called math camp. And no, RSI is not a camp, but summer between 8th and 9th, 7th and 8th, he had been away 4 years. RSI was the last of those 4. The prior year, he had already been in Boston all summer at the program for mathematics and young scientists at Boston University. So in fact, he knew RSI pretty well because the Promise kids go over and play Frisbee with the RSI kids, and the Promise kids go over to MIT to find out what's going on at RSI because all of them want to go to RSI the next year. The summer prior to that, he'd been at Hampshire College for the Hampshire College Summer Studies in Mathematics, which was 6 weeks. And the year before that, he'd been at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology for three weeks. So by the time he got to RSI, he was pretty comfortable being away from home. And when we heard from him, but it was mostly email back and forth.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually, I realized, Susan, as you're saying that it is easier. It was easier for us in that way too, because Charlie basically never spent a summer at home after 4th grade until I think the summer after his freshman year in college. So we were used to him being away. But as excited as we were to hear about RSI, because he'd looked forward to it for so many years, we did feel like we needed to let him have his space.
Thank you, ladies. We've seen a couple of questions about medical emergencies and prescriptions. MIT has a medical center, and typically if there is a medical emergency, one of our staff members will take the student to MIT Medical. If they cannot treat the student, then we will have them transported to Massachusetts General Hospital or Mount Auburn, depending on the nature of the difficulty. And as far as prescriptions, there are CVS stores around, and it should be fairly easy if you are already set up with CVS for the student to be able to pick up a prescription. You might want to check with your doctor and if the refill can be done at CVS and have that information transferred. That should not be a huge ordeal. A counselor or somebody can go with them. Not a problem, just alert us. That's why we ask all those medical questions. And then someone has asked about continuing the research after RSI. Yes, and that's at the discretion of the student and the mentor. Once RSI is over on August 5th, everyone has to leave. MIT is getting the dorms ready for the freshmen, so they can't stay there because literally Monday morning they want everybody out of Massey Hall, all of our staff. So sometimes they do continue to collaborate together remotely. And if somebody is from the Massachusetts area and they can see their mentor because they want to finish up some things, that can also happen. But again, it's at the discretion of the mentor, and the student has to work that out. And our staff can help. It would be ideal for Dr. Silman to be in that conversation.
Yes, thank you, Maite. You're talking a little bit about sort of the student-mentor relationship. There are a couple of questions about letters of recommendation after RSI. So how does this generally work? Do you know? Could you speak on that briefly?
Yes. The center will write up to now, because of the competition at all these universities. We used to write for 6 schools. We're what's called a supplemental. So the student has to decide which 6 schools they would like to hear from Dr. Silman. If the student wants to apply, and they will probably apply to more than 6 schools, and wants to ask their mentor to do it, mentors and Dr. Silman would not write to the same school because most places don't allow 2 supplementals. And as this process gets underway, that has to be verified, that has to be checked to make sure that we're not overdoing and overplaying our hand and sending too much where it's not wanted, required, and certainly needed. But the center will do this. There will be a college, what we call a small college fair. That'll be July 11th. They'll learn more there directly from the schools. And then CEE President Joanne DeGennaro will be up there to have a special session with all of the students concerning college admissions, her advice, and also the process that we go through here at the center. Remember, there are 80 of them, and we don't have a huge staff. And we're happy to write. Dr. Silman will write for anyone who asks for a letter, and we are the supplemental again.
Thank you. Another important question that was just asked here regarding food and where children will eat. Of course, I'm sure a lot of the students are going to have some sort of allergies. So how is this sort of going to be accommodated for them? Where are they going to be eating during the institute?
There are a lot of options within MIT. Again, go back to the medical forums. We ask questions. Please make sure we're aware of food allergies or other allergies. And yes, there's vegetarian food available. There always will be on a large college campus. So we will need a heads up on those things so we can make sure that we help your son or daughter.
Awesome. Thank you. We have about 5 or so minutes left. I wanted to take this opportunity to, if either Susan, Marley, or Maite have any last remarks, anything we think we still want you guys to know, to have that platform to speak. So, Maite, is there anything you wanted to say or wrap up?
Thank you for allowing your children to be part of this program and for sharing them with us this summer. And please, if you have not sent in complete information regarding allergies or medical concerns or anything else, just shoot me an email so we are sure to update. We want to make sure that it is a good summer, not only socially, but medically, safely, in every way possible. So thank you for trusting us with your children.
Marley or Susan, did you have any last thoughts?
I think this is Marley. I think it's clear from everything Susan and I have said, and simply the fact that we're still involved with this many years after our kids finished with RSI, how great a program this is. What I tell everyone is it's always a little worrisome to send your kid off to the unknown, but this is one you shouldn't worry about. They've been doing this for years. They absolutely know what they're doing. And the other thing I'd say is that what I want to let all the parents know is as you go forward, I hope you all will continue to be involved with RSI as Susan and I have. The program needs support, both support of this type from parents and financial support. It's been an amazing thing. Charlie has continued to go back and sees Maite at least once a year.
Oh, yeah.
Comes to the Christmas parties, the holiday party at Joanne's, and they never turn Charlie away when he's looking for school advice, career advice, just talking a little about what he's doing. This is a program that truly cares about your kids. So I encourage all of you and your kids to stay involved with RSI and to let your kids have one of the most amazing experiences they will probably ever have.
Thank you, Marley.
I would echo what Marley said, and yes, those of you whose children do this year are probably the best resources for next year's parents in terms of helping them understand what's involved. And RSI is an amazing experience, and as Marley mentioned, needs the financial support of all of its alums, all of its alum parents, anybody who values that kind of special educational opportunity for kids. We need your support in all ways.
Thank you, Susan. Doug, did you have any last thoughts that you wanted to go over?
Well, again, let me echo what everyone else said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your children with the program. They'll benefit, and all the rest of the kids that spend time with them will benefit as well. I have been impressed with CEE. They've been around since 1984. I've been on the board for about 15 years, which for me is a long board tenure, and that's because it's such an amazing organization, and the things that I see these kids achieve is just breathtaking. So thank you for letting them experience it this summer.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you. If any of your questions weren't answered during our webinar, obviously we don't have unlimited time, but if they weren't answered, please send me an email. My email is lmuratore@cee.org. We'll send you an email after this to make sure that you have that. But if you have any questions that still aren't answered, please send them to me, and I'll make sure that someone here at CEE gets to you. But other than that, thank you all again for coming. Definite thank you to our guest speakers, Susan and Marley, for coming back after all these years, and to Doug and Maite for providing very important information about the program. Again, if you have questions still, please send me an email. But thank you all again for joining us, and I will go ahead and end the session.